Hi, everyone. My name is Danita Roundtree Green, and I am co founder and co CEO of Coming to the Table RVA. CTTT brings people together for the courageous yet clumsy and often uncomfortable conversation on race, acknowledging historical harms and our need to repair them. Our goal is racial healing, and it's our pleasure to introduce this series, Linked Stories Across the Color Line, linking Virginians through blood, purpose, and places. Residents from across Virginia are confronting the truth about their ancestors, discovering their connections in an effort to heal a wounded past. In this series, Coming to the Table RVA brings residents from all over Virginia together, black and white, who are related through the legacy of enslavement, kinship, the clash of history, or the need to repair it. These are voices from across the color line, paired together to tell one story. Listen and discover how slavery links us, what that means today, and what actions we must take to create a new narrative. We invite our participants and our audience to interrogate the depth of our racially charged history and ask questions that many changes the opinions and attitudes of the topic of race today. How are we grappling with the heritage we share? What shared legacies keep us connected? How do we define family across the racial divide? And what actions can we take to become united and share in a joint legacy of Virginia? We hope Linked captures both the essence and painful dichotomy of the race conversation, or our lack of it in America, as well as the disconnectedness we are currently experiencing in our nation. We also hope the series serves as a model for new relationships across many divides, and that the cultural and intergenerational aspects alone will build bridges that seem uncrossable to many. We want to thank Virginia Humanities. Their support made this project possible. And our moderator for this episode is the talented and beautiful Lauren Stinson, a leader in interracial dialogue amongst her classmates at the University of Richmond. You are about to meet Reggie Harris and Greg Greenway, two phenomenal musical performers with a story to tell of how they are forever linked. Thank you for being with us.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Lauren Stenson. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a current student at the University of Richmond. I co-founded an organization called Interpoint that facilitates racial dialogue, and today I am here in collaboration with Coming to the Table. I will be your host for this conversation, and I'm excited for the opportunity to get to speak to the both of you. To start, would you guys be willing to share some information about the two of you, about each of you? Let us know an introduction, who you are, and what you do.
Well, I guess I'll start since I am the oldest by 3 days.
That's
So
right.
that gives me a little bit of cachet. I'm Reggie
Right.
Harris, and I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I live in upstate New York now. And for most of my life, music has been a part of my life, and I am a musician. I have been making my living as a musician storyteller for over 45 years. And I am a friend of Greg Greenway. We are friends for over 30 years. And much of my life has been committed to using music to open conversations and to open windows to looking at our world and our history and trying to find ways to learn from our history and our personal narratives. So that is what I'm about in the world.
My name is Greg Greenway, And I've been a friend of Reggie Harris for over 30 some years. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and music was my vehicle. Music, you grow up in a place like the capital of the Confederacy, and you're handed one story, and then slowly as you get older and the information comes into your world, my lifetime spans 3 days after his, but the coming of the outside world into Richmond. So another story was told, and it was told to me through music. And so music became a vehicle for me. And the second I had it in my own power, I bought a mostly orange Datsun 510 station wagon. I drove to Boston, Massachusetts. So I went to sort of liberal central. And to me, but my heroes musically always told me the truth. And they told me about the real story. And that's what really drew me to music, because I was, at that time, there was no truth other than the policy that was being, pumped to you every day. So music became my vehicle, and it was a vehicle through which I met Reggie at the Village Gate in New York City. And we immediately started talking. And, I see myself as an artist, and it is the artist's job to hold a mirror up to society and say, I hear what you say you are. This is what you look like for real. And so I've tried to reflect that in my music.
Just like that river, I've been running ever since. But it's been a long time coming. But I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
That was very powerful. I think you guys both shared a lot about those awakening experiences. And so my next question is, can you share a specific experience or group of experiences that you can recall where you're awakening to race being a thing or racism being a thing, or the fact that people around you assign value to your race or others' race?
Well, largely, from the time that I went out of my neighborhood, I began to have those experiences of being the other. Of thinking of myself as just being either part of the group or part of the team. But suddenly I was in neighborhoods that made it very clear that blacks weren't welcome there. And the idea of being able to go into a choir or a classroom and have people mostly focus on my skin color. There were so many hurts that I absorbed because I believed that it was a small problem. I didn't realize that this was part of a system that had been part of America since before America was America. And certainly in a situation where I and a friend of mine decided to take our friend Kathy to a movie that we were going to, and have her parents tell her that she couldn't go because they didn't want her to be seen, not with us, with me. I shared that story in a training that I did some years later when I decided I was going to take on this issue of racism and prejudice and diversity. I sought some training from the National Coalition Building Institute. And at the training, they started talking to us about the groups to which we belong and all of these things. And we went into different groups. And then finally, they asked us to pair up with one other partner. And I paired up with a white college professor from Ohio. And we were supposed to just tell a story when race had hurt us. Or in his case, when he had been part of an action where he had discriminated and was hurt. And I chose that story about not being able to take my friend Kathy to the movies. It was an intellectual story, I thought, because it had happened months, actually years before that. And I felt confident in telling that story from an intellectual point of view. And so I shared the story with him, and he reacted and said, "Oh, that was horrible. That family, I mean, they betrayed your trust." And I said, "Yeah." And then he told me his story, and then we came back to the group, and they asked for several people to come up and tell their story to the large group. And being a performer, I thought, chance to get in front of people. So I decided to go up and share my story and tell it pretty much the way I told to him. And so I did. Probably 6, 7 years removed from that incident, maybe even more now that I think about it. And so they asked me to recount the story briefly, and I did. And then the trainer said, "How did you feel in that moment when that family told you that you were not equal to them, that told you that you were black and they didn't want you to be seen with their daughter?" And I said, "Well, it hurt." And she said, "Could you describe the hurt?" And I started to talk, and then suddenly I choked up. And I'm facing this group of about 300 people, and I'm trying to get the words out. And then I started to cry and sob, and then I couldn't speak. And the trainer went on to explain to the group that this is what we do, that we push these things down and we put them in compartments, and we say it didn't hurt us. We say it didn't matter. Even now, speaking about it, I'm starting to choke up. And I remember the look on Kathy's face when she came out of the house and said, "My parents won't let me go." She didn't say why in that moment, but it crushed my heart.
Greg, how do you feel listening to that story and those emotions from your friend?
Well, Reggie and I have talked about this, many, many times. And just to see his face, there's 100 other stories. 100 other stories and it's amazing to know somebody whose heart is so large as Reggie's, that someone would do that. I just can't even imagine being in the position of being in the same place and somebody doing that to Reggie. I have no idea what I would do. But there are many stories, and it's so hurtful because I know his heart. I mean, he has such a big heart, and he opens it, and he allows this, and this affords me a tremendous opportunity to understand how he feels about it. It's not an intellectual thing. It's a visceral thing to see my friend hurt like this. Somebody's hurting my brother. So my side of it is when I was a senior in high school, there was a week where we volunteered for the city of Richmond. And it was in the end of January, and I had never been in this cold of weather. It was 6 degrees. And what I did was I went around with the HUD guy who interviewed people who had applied for public housing. So big list of people. We just drove around to parts of Richmond that I had never been in. And we came to this, it was 6 degrees, as I said. And we came to a house that was, it was really more like a garden shed. It had no insulation in it whatsoever. It was like 16 by 16, one room. It had literally fallen over and was leaning on the house next to it. And inside of that were 4 Black people, ancient, was sitting there with overcoats on and everything they had around a can of Sterno. And I looked at the woman who was closest to me, and I will never forget her eyes looking at me. Like she looked at me from a million miles away. And when I looked at it later on, it was only a few miles from where I lived, but it was a million miles away. So I couldn't believe that I was a part, voluntarily or involuntarily, a part of a system that would do this to human beings. One of my signature songs really started with a conversation I had with Reggie very early in our relationship, because I remember it was a dial phone. It was a dial-up phone. I picked up this phone and I dialed his number, not thinking I was going to get him. I thought I'd get back then it was an answering machine, and he answered. And I don't know what I was reading, whatever, but I just said, at the time I had really long hair. And I said, "Reggie, I could cut my hair. I could walk right downtown into Boston. I could get a job and I could disappear into that system and I could leave all this behind. I can't imagine what it would be like every day of your life to be judged on your most superficial characteristic." And without a nanosecond of hesitation, he said, "You have no idea." And he's right. I don't. I can't have any idea. I have an idea about how he feels. And this I can convey into my music and into the passion that I have for what I'm doing. So I feel that this amazing heart that this man has, and this openness and willing to talk about it, and willing to tell me things, when I get the, it's cultural, that's, but I appreciate that he's willing to let me in enough to tell me when I'm wrong. I need that. All white people need that, need some avenue into the Black world, the Black experience, because it's impossible for us, because we are born into a world that put us in one place and Black people in another. And so we can fight it all our lives. I'm still enculturated. I still have to fight it. But that's my job. And maybe I can help this great mass of white people understand this in some way and put a human face on this. And the human face on it for me is Reggie's.
One of the training aspects that the National Coalition Building Institute taught me is that, we all develop a story. We all take in information. We are around people who are part of our family, our tribe, our comfort zone. And the information that we then find out about in the world gets measured against that narrative, that comfort zone. We believe things when they come from people that we trust, or when we are actually hearing things that come from a place that we can, really identify with, that we can resonate with. Things that come from other people, well, we have to question those because we don't know them, or we don't know what their story is. They taught us that everybody collects that story, and then if you want to add something to that story, generally it has to go through a filter. And they said, when you're talking to people, they have their story down and they're willing to defend it if something comes to challenge what they already know. So they were teaching us, as I was beginning to become a trainer, that you don't walk into the room and just decide you're going to change somebody's mind. You're not going to change their emotional construct. They're going to defend that when they feel that it's, in danger. And you have to get them talking about their story so you can hear what their story is. They said nobody likely is willing to shift the narrative of that story until their story is heard, until they know you understand who they are. And so in looking at putting a human face on it, people respond to the fact that something has happened to, or they see some danger for someone that they know and that they love or respect. So, when we talk to groups and when I talk to people, the first thing I want to know is I want to give them an opportunity to tell me who they are. And I want to tell them who I am. And, we all have emotions in life. And, the idea is to connect to something that is shared between us. Well, for the most part, white people in America have been taught that they don't share anything with Black people or with Hispanic people or with the other. So they're not really willing to see us as worthy of their trust, their respect. And so the only chance that we have to really shift the narrative is to bring up some sense of our connectedness. And that is one of the reasons why it takes so long. Not to mention the fact that while we're trying to do this work of connection, the system, as it was and is constantly trying to make sure that doesn't happen. So they're consistently firing in more information to reinforce that narrative, that false narrative. And as I tell people who show up to our performances or our presentations, or who we engage in conversation, as much as you really say you want all of us to live together in peace and harmony, there are people in this world who clearly do not. And they usually are engaged with having a lot more money and a lot more access and a lot more power than the people who are working to bring us all together. And it seems that also playing on the emotion and fear that gets generated from dealing with people who are the other is a whole lot more powerful because of who we are as human beings. So it takes a lot more to get that message through.
The last question I was going to ask you is, how do we get there? Using music, using all the resources that you guys have throughout your lifetime and your friendship as an example. If you could talk to, let's say, everyone in the country and they had to listen to what you had to say for 1 minute, what would you say? And you knew that if you said it, they would really hear you. What would you want to convey to them about these issues and how to do better?
Let me go first on this one, Reg, so you can wrap it all up. What I would say is that our mutual interest is our self-interest. That we can lay down so much fear, mistrust, wasted energy by finding each other, and stop wasting our time on that stuff, the divisional stuff, the keeping the status quo stuff. That it's like I was saying, walking in that group of 70,000 people. What an exhilarating feeling to look around you and know that everyone was together. And this is a sense that Americans don't have because we've been played for centuries. So it's not altruistic. It literally will help you individually to let all of this go and to join together and realize that as a people, we are a great people, and it will be a greater life for you and for everyone.
To begin our program when we were performing together, which is a mirror of our friendship, we each tell our stories. We each tell and talk about how we've come from different places, and that we learn through our own personal work and through our friendship to challenge the narrative and share our narrative. We start the program with some songs, and then Greg reads a poem by Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou, who said at one point in a speech that I heard, "We have all been bought and sold." And as Greg said, we have all been compromised by this system that seeks to enrich itself, not us. But we read this poem, and the beginning, actually it's from the middle of the poem, her poem, On the Pulse of Morning. And it says, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again." The courage that we manage to display, hopefully because we learn to trust each other and open our hearts, allows us to face the pain that has imprisoned and enslaved us all. And in the imprisoning and in acknowledging, it actually sets us free. So I would say to all of them, let's look deep into our own hearts and see the pain that exists for all of us, because that's what generally happens. And then in that moment, when we are conflicted, confused, and afraid, we can say to each other, that is our pain, but we do not have to be defined by it. She says later, do not be wedded forever to fear. And that is the emotion that the system plays on us all. Who are you afraid of? We'll keep you safe from those people. So this is the legacy of hope that we are able to sing out, to sing into that place that we say, you don't have to be afraid of these things. Once we acknowledge them, we have the right and the privilege to move on. And that is what I would say.
There were times that I thought I just couldn't go on.